Indicate, Mr. Chair, that I would like to put on one more witness. It'll be very short. And beyond that, just a closing that I have when that's appropriate, whenever that's appropriate.
Okay.
And Mr. Chair, and good evening. My name is Elizabeth Theobald, Deputy County Attorney. I just want to be sure that the board is aware that I have reached out to counsel between this last hearing today to make sure it is that we're clear. We stipulate that what it is that happened at the Planning Commission level is what it is that happened at the Planning Commission level. I appreciate how it is that you just went ahead and laid out where it is that we were. Mr. Wolfgang made me aware that he's interested in just calling that one additional witness.
Okay. Thank you. So, Mr. Wolfgang, why don't you proceed with your witness? And I know that in the interest of efficiency and time, you had been proffering testimony in the past without objection. Are you going to continue down that path, or are you going to have an interrogatory?
I have not had an opportunity to discuss this with Mr. Fink and Mr. Ruda, so I presume that this witness should be sworn then.
Okay.
Ken Hastings.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury the testimony you're about to give is the truth?
I do.
And if you would have a seat and state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Ken Hastings. I live at 39044 Holly Drive, Mechanicsville, Maryland, and I represent the Mason Springs Conservancy.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Hastings, you were one of the petitioners in this matter for this appeal, is that right?
That is correct.
And you asked me for the opportunity to testify this evening, is that correct?
That's correct.
And in particular, one of the matters that you would like to address the Commission, the Board of Appeals about, was testimony or discussion from the last meeting regarding the availability of to the public of addressing staff regarding these matters and considering that input to the Planning Commission.
Yes, that's true.
Okay. So tell me your experience having to do with addressing staff regarding matters that are pending before the Planning Commission.
Normally, if it's a matter of a public hearing, there's a notice in the paper that says that the documents are available at PGM, and that is generally a fairly efficient process because they advertise it. That's the only way you could get it. If you want other information, it's often very difficult for a member of the public, not so much for developers, but for members of the public to get that information. I'd like to just relate one of my examples. I'm not going to spend the night here. I could with the examples that I've had, but this particular one I think is fairly relevant. Back on February 1st, I was interested in some information about the Piney Branch sewer line project. Just a sewer project been around for 8 or 9 years. There was a tentative permit given by MDE, and I was curious about what the details were after all this time, why it wasn't just approved and what the problems were. So I contacted Peter Ludo because I didn't know who was really in charge of sewers. And it wasn't me, but I didn't know who else was in charge of sewers. And I sent him an email, and he forwarded it to Mr. John Stevens at CIP because it was a CIP project, and so it came under him. And I wasn't smart enough to know that up front, or maybe I would have gone right to John in the first place. The response I got back on February the 4th was that I needed to send a Public Information Act request through the county attorney's office in order to get information about this sewer project that had been going on for next to forever. So on February 11th, I found the right form. That's not a simple thing. I'm getting pretty good at it right now. Filed a request with the county attorney's office, and of course these things have to go through snail mail. I can't just send an attachment via email, but I can do almost everything else in the world by email. But for this one, I had to send snail mail. I asked for access to the documents, for the relevant documents, and I wanted to determine which copies I wanted later because I didn't want to get a pile of junk that I really didn't want and get a big bill for copying. I wanted a chance to view the materials first. February 22nd, staff called to advise me that my CD was ready. Well, I didn't ask for CD, and I asked for access, but I didn't make a big deal about it because the staff person assured me that everything that was in the file had been dumped onto the CD, and I couldn't possibly want anything more than was on the CD. So I said, all right, I'll take the CD and we'll just go on with our lives. Then she pointed out that the charges for that CD might be significant, but she didn't know how much it was going to be. Well, I kind of rejected that blank check concept and said, well, no, that's not really the way I wanted this to work. I really need for you to get back to me with real charges. And she agreed that she would do that. I think she understood the problem. But by March 4th, this is almost 30 days after my initial request, I still didn't have anything in hand. And so I contacted Commissioner President Peter Murphy for help. I figured if anybody could shake this loose, he could do that. And 4 days later, I got a CD. So that was pretty good, and I was sort of happy about that. Except when I opened the CD up on my computer, it was just chock-a-block full of stuff that I really had no interest in, and it didn't help me at all. Staff had no way of knowing that. I understand that, but this is part of my reason for wanting to get in there and see the documents in the first place. So I waded through it, and I read the emails that were in it and all that, and I found that there were two relevant documents that were referenced in the emails that were not on the CD. This time, now I have a contact person. I know who's in charge and what I have to do. So I sent a PIA request to Planning and Growth Management. And wouldn't you know, if you send a PIA request through the county attorney's office, it takes a different form from what you have to use if you go through PGM. I just throw that out for future reference in case you ever get into this fix again. On April 7th, I made another trip to county government and received a totally usable CD. No one could open it. It just had gibberish on it, and it cost me $2.50, just like the first one did. So I complained, and staff, I have to say, staff diligently jumped on this problem, and I think they worked very hard and expeditiously solved the problems. And on April 13th, I made another trip to county government and got the right CD, and there was no cost this time. Okay, so there's good news and bad news. The bad news is it took almost 10 weeks for this PIA request to bear fruit. And all I really wanted, I wanted to understand this model study that told why it was okay for sewer lines to fill up with stormwater and flood over at Mason Springs, where I spend a lot of time. This is not my only example I think is relevant because this should never have been a PIA request. It was simple. It was a matter of public information that had no special strings attached to it. There was no litigation. It was just a member of the public looking for information. So it's not a level playing field, and the notion that I have the same rights as developers when it comes time to get information just doesn't work out for me. The playing field is not level. I have hopes that that's going to get better. But as I just pointed out to you, the bar is not all that high. It doesn't have to get a whole lot better to be really, really good for us. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, sir. That would be the only testimony. I do have a closing when it's appropriate to do that.
Okay. Is there any cross-examination for this witness? Thank you. All right. So